And keeping with the U.S., Mitchell Silk holds the distinction of being the highest-ranking Hasidic Jew in U.S. government history, serving as Assistant U.S. Treasury Secretary for International Markets in the Trump administration. Now, in the second installment of his interview with our Mike Wagenheim there again, he discusses the key role that he played in helping to formulate the economic components of the Abraham Accords between Israel, the UAE, and Bahrain.
What role did you play in your role at Treasury in developing the Abraham Accords and developing international investment opportunities in the Middle East?
So let me start by clarifying that the work under the Abraham Accords and the really extraordinary successes that we realized for the U.S., for the region, and really for the world were spearheaded in the White House by a very small group that was led by Jared Kushner, and until he left government, Jason Greenblatt, both of whom are close colleagues and great friends. Jason was focused primarily on the political side of matters. Jared was focused on the economic side. I was tasked within Treasury to help out with one compartment of that work, which was to take the work that I had been doing up until that point, largely in LATAM and in the Asia Pacific in energy, and give some thought to whether I could apply the techniques that I was successfully pursuing elsewhere to the Middle East. And I did formulate a couple of compartmentalized plans, each of which were rather large in and of themselves, that were really regional economic growth plans that were contemplated to be executed through regional integration. In other words, each of the plans and the economic development that was contemplated was cross-border, involving up to 4 or 5 countries in each of the projects. And the approach that I took was to rely on my skills in energy and infrastructure. And so those plans were, one of those plans was a part of the Peace Through Prosperity conference, the very successful conference that was held in Bahrain. And then after the Abraham Accords were signed, we convened last year's session of the annual gathering that we have with the Israeli government, which is called the Joint Economic Development Group, the JEDG. And I presented one of those prosperity through regional integration in energy plans to the group.
Walk us through the development of those plans. How did they come about? How did you come up with the ideas, and how much of it has actually been implemented so far, and what are the future prospects?
Basically, for the Middle East plan, what I did was I put the thinking cap on, and I came up with a couple of ideas. These were typically referred to within Treasury and on the interagency as yet another of the Silk crazy ideas. But actually, many of them stuck. And what I came onto and presented to our friends in Israel, I think does have a solid grounding, and I do hope will see the light of day. And let me just run you through now the specifics of the thinking on the Israel side. There are interestingly very considerable resources that have now been put online from Israel in the form of vast offshore reserves in the Mediterranean. And those reserves are presently being brought onshore to Israel. And interestingly, Israel has entered into a long-term energy supply contract with the Jordanians. And so my concept involved exploiting and expanding that cross-border opportunity and then extending it into further countries in the region by linking up through energy infrastructure.